NANI?!
What's going on, everyone? Jeremy here from The Quartering, and today might be the day where we cross 800,000 subscribers, and I couldn't be more thankful, honored, humbled by all of you who choose to click that little red button right below the video that says subscribe or on the main channel. It'll help get you notifications, and it'll also just make it easier in general to find my videos. So I hope that today will be the day you do so. I'm also on Parler now, a Twitter alternative that lacks the censorship and promotes free speech. It's actually very active, and if you check out Parler and you just go to /thequartering and give me a follow there, I'd love to see you there. I'd love to see another Twitter alternative succeed. Well, the first, I suppose. Now, more trouble for The Last of Us 2. This is the story that keeps on giving, and I'm really glad because, last week things were a little slow news-wise, but now this week, zoinks! So much news. It starts off with Kojima Productions throwing shade at The Last of Us 2. Now, a bunch of people sent me screenshots, and I was like, this can't be real. I went to the Facebook page and confirmed that it is real. Nasty. Internet comments are nothing new. This is via Game Revolution. Nothing new to the world, but sometimes a developer has had enough and decides to respond. One particular person harshly criticized the Kojima Productions game Death Stranding, emphatically stating that The Last of Us 2 was a better game. This time, however, Kojima Productions decided to fire back. Now, by the way, who's still obsessed with the Death Stranding? Why are people even talking about that game still? It seems so weird that you would be on Facebook, like forever ago that game came out, it feels like, and still raging about it? I don't know. I'll never understand that. The amusing exchange took place on the official Kojima Productions Facebook page. The team put out a post asking people how their weekend was, going to ask them to share their best screenshots of the game with the promise that some of them might be retweeted by the company's official Twitter account. One person, however, took the opportunity to criticize Death Stranding, and Hideo Kojima's company didn't let this snarky comment slide. So you see here, boring as poop, solid, sold it to buy The Last of Us Part 2. Post a picture of The Last of Us Part 2. Then Kojima Productions replies, the choice of game reflects the quality of its player. Maybe it suits you more. P.S. Also, the choice of words. And then they posted the Metacritic score of 4.3. I love it. You just love to see it. Now, was this posted by Kojima himself? I'm sure not. But I love it. Social media posts by game devs often get comments like this, so it isn't particularly a surprise. What makes this comment particularly special, however, is that Kojima Productions decided to clap back with a vicious burn. The text alone wouldn't have been too inflammatory on its own. However, Kojima Productions also include an image of The Last of Us 2's Metacritic score. While the game's Metascore of 95 shows very high praise from critics and has constantly been tagged as a Metacritic must-play, critics and the user score matters entirely. At the time of writing, it's at a 4.4 out of 10. One could interpret this comment positively. After all, The Last of Us 2 did get a Metacritic score of 95. However, the next text of the comment, Kojima Productions seems to criticize the inflammatory language used by the Facebook user. So I'd wager they were insinuating The Last of Us 2 is not the best game out there. Either way, it might be a good idea to be a little nicer out there on the internet. Well, nah, that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. And speaking of the Metacritic score, The Last of Us Part 2's Metacritic score rises 32% now that people have actually finished the game. Wow. Awesome. Paul, I mean, I love you, Paul, but man, all your articles always have this slant, this little knob nibble slant for the industry. I'm more of an Eric Kane guy on Forbes, but the great user war score was over, or War Over the Last of Us Part 2 rages on. The game now has amassed a truly astonishing 81,000 user reviews at the time of this writing. At the point of contrast, the original game has, over its entire lifespan, got less than 10,000. I am indeed trolling a bit with my headline. When I first covered... Okay, all right, good. When I first covered the great user score flood coming to Metacritic, the game had been out a few hours, was sunk down to 3.4. Since then, with 81,500 reviews, that's a 32% rise. It brought the score up to a 4.5. Yes, that's still very low, but I think it does reflect a lot higher scores coming in because it's not easy to drag up an average with that many low scores already. That's very true. That's a huge wave of 10 out of 10s in order to raise the score that much. Now, interestingly enough, Paul Tassi is not calling this a review brigade. Interesting. Now, let's say there was a flux, 100,000 people might watch this video after following me on Parler. Maybe, just maybe, they're going to end up going and leaving a negative review. 20,000 new negative reviews, let's say. Now that the game's been out, Paul Tassi couldn't call that a review brigade, could he? Now, I do think it's reflective of people actually playing and finishing the game. Some of it may be Metacritic deleting some of the most offensive and hateful reviews, but again, there are still 81,500 live. As of right now, by the way, it's 82,143. And I do want to note that the Metascore did drop another point. It was at, 96 forever, and now it's down to a 94. Why? Because I think one middling review came in. Not a single negative review, but here's the frustrating thing about this score. The websites that reviewed the game negatively didn't leave a score. Like, Jimquisition calls it's decent. I don't think I've seen a bigger gap between promise and reality since I played Fable 3. 7.5 out of 10. I suppose that's positive. Kotaku and Polygon didn't review it positively. I don't think Vice did either. All we had come in now was Cultured Vultures with a new 65. In trying to subvert expectations, The Last of Us Part 2 discards the best aspects of its predecessor to provide a rot revenge tale that is ill-considered, ending on a note that makes everything, all the violence, all the loss, all the struggle, feel utterly, hopelessly pointless. And still, they gave it a 65, which is, if you look at the review, that's nuts. That's way higher than I would have expected given that kind of final review. We look at the user scores. It's down to a 4.5. I think, according to this article, it was still at a 4.5 there with 82,000 reviews. But we do know, I had somebody email me last night to tell me that they were still having trouble leaving a negative review, but then they left a 10 out of 10 review and went back and edited it to a 4 out of 10, and that worked. So that's pretty curious. It's all anecdotal, right? All the 404 errors and the website loading problems and things like that. But there's a lot of it. I maintain that a lot of the initial review brigading of the game was from a few different sources. People hearing the leaks and getting angry about the plot turns. People seeing leaked cutscenes out of context. Now, all those cutscenes, now that we've seen them, I don't think there's any additional context that has changed people's reactions to those cutscenes. People watching streamers play the game and complain their way through the game, or it's people who played it, got to a big early death and stormed off to write a review after the first 2 hours. And yes, some subset of anti-LGBTQ sentiment is there too. Criticizing Naughty Dog's agenda. If you don't believe that it's a factor, I have screenshots of several hundred user reviews I can show you. And there are plenty more that are like, let me be clear, this isn't about the SCW stuff. All the writing is bad. Well, Paul, I think that is very disingenuous. I think that there is some percentage of people that are just like, gay stuff, don't like the game. But also, why was the DLC for The Last of Us, which was entirely about Abby being gay, reviewed so well? This is such a sloppy generalization Paul's making here that you couldn't possibly not like the game. If you didn't like the game, it must be because you don't like LGBTQ people? I mean, that's ridiculous. But that said, Paul also has ignored these scores of 10 out of 10 reviews with very little words or anything like that. But that's just a solid, well-researched review by somebody who finished the game. If you left a 0 out of a 10, well, then you must not have finished the game. You must be anti-LGBTQ, or you might have a problem with Naughty Dog's agenda. Let me be very clear. Naughty Dog does have an agenda. I'm sure that some people bought the game, played the whole game, and genuinely disliked it and rated it low. Though we do live in a culture where systems like this are essentially binary, and if you want to be like, nah, Last of Us is too bad train, then you're not going to give it a 5 or a 6, you're going to give it a 0. And yes, conversely, if you like it, you're probably going to get a 10 to try to offset those. Oh, there, whoa, Paul, finally, Paul Tassi, you acknowledge that, yes, there are, in fact, bunk 10 out of 10 reviews. I don't think it's terribly controversial to say that people who sit down and play the entire 25-hour game themselves and experience a story free from leaks, YouTube cutscenes, and Twitch commentary are more likely to think it's good than not. No, I don't think it's controversial. I think it's wrong. I don't think that you can just assume because somebody hasn't been spoiled that they're going to like the game. I also think that this whole notion that somebody has to play an entire game from beginning to end before the review is validated is freaking absurd. There are a ton of games that I've picked up and put like 2 hours into, and it was so bad, so broken, so annoyingly just grindy that you quit the game. Does that mean that your review is invalidated? No, I don't think it does. I think that if a game is so bad, why should I have to suffer through the entire game just so that people like Paul Tassi will call my review valid? And speaking of more controversy, The Last of Us Part 2 dead naming prompts outcry from the LGBTQ community and allies. Okay, so dead naming is essentially when somebody is trans and you use their old name. All right, I don't know why this is particularly offensive, but I'm not trans and I don't care. If you want me to call you Jim and your old name used to be Jane, cool. I'll call you Jim, whatever you want. But in the way the dead name happens in The Last of Us 2 is Lev, who is trans in the game, gets basically outed as trans by somebody dead naming them. Lev is an adolescent who befriends Abby during her treacherous adventure in Seattle. Lev has been kicked out of his religious community known as the Seraphites for shaving his head and identifying as male. The game drops some pretty clear contextual hints about Lev's identity, but during a confrontation with some Seraphites, they angrily refer to Lev by their dead name. Well, all these like very careful pronoun use here. Lev asks if Abby heard what the Seraphites called him. She confirms that she did. Abby doesn't press the issue, only to say that he can tell her more if he feels like it. Lev declines. Imagine being worried about dead naming in a zombie apocalypse. Only ultra-privileged video game reviewers would be worried about dead naming in a zombie apocalypse. That plot point itself is completely irrelevant. I'm sorry. That plot point is relevant because it outs Lev as trans. That is on purpose by Naughty Dog, okay? But I don't think that they would really care about that in the zombie apocalypse. Maybe. Now, for it, so the outrage is, it is, for example, extremely distressing for cis writers to have a trans character where they have to go through multiple levels of meandering subplot where the character is repeatedly dead named and it's revealed that he was meant to become a wife to an elder. Fellow cis writers, do not dead name your trans characters. Just don't do it. We don't need to. Well, it's part of the story, though. I mean, it's meant as a bad thing in the story. So I don't know. That seems like a reach. But nonetheless, The Last of Us 2 is a gift that keeps on giving. And I hope you enjoyed this video. We'll talk to you again real soon.